Guys, I've got something really super important to tell you. Oh, there's a butterfly. Oh, that's cool. Oh, was I saying something? Oh, oh yeah, the whole world's gonna explode! Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and emotional dysregulation that are excessive and pervasive. And of the 2.6 million people in the UK that have this disorder, I was born as one of them. Thanks, Mum and Dad. ADHD is a condition that affects pretty much every aspect of your life, including how we interact with and enjoy certain hobbies. And in this video, we're going to be delving into the way that ADHD can affect the way we play video games, which video games really scratch that dopamine-starved part of our brain, and which games make me want to jump into a rancor pit. If you have ADHD, or if you don't and you're just curious on how our brains work, don't worry, you're all welcome along for the ride as we take a look into gaming with ADHD. Also, just for some context, I'm currently recording this while England is on fire, so if you see me sweating like Prince Andrew at an underage disco, then that explains it. Also, you may notice if you've seen my previous videos, there is a slight continuity discrepancy, because this wall is now playing when it didn't used to be. That is because my Middle-earth poster has fallen down for like the 4th time in a row, and it keeps falling down. It fell off in the middle of the night, it scared the shite out of me. So I need to figure out a better way to hang this, so at least for this video, this wall will remain blank. Sorry for any continuity buffs out there, I'm very, very sorry. Feel free to lynch me. Okay, the hair's gone up, it's too bloody hot in here, Jesus Christ. To start off, let's get a baseline understanding of how someone with ADHD differs from someone who's more neurotypical. Please bear in mind that a lot of this is just my opinion. I don't know what it's like to not live with this disorder, so if a lot of this does speak to you, then please consider getting yourself tested for it. So, the A and the D in ADHD stands for attention deficit. This means that people with this disorder have a much more difficult time in regulating their attention. A lot of people think that this means we just can't focus on anything and have a very low attention span. However, it's actually the case that our attention is just a lot harder to hold down on tasks that we don't find stimulating. The way I like to think about it is that a neurotypical person's attention is like a solid block of iron. So if they need to do their homework, they take that attention and put it into the homework basket and they get along fine. The go play video games basket might be larger and more fun, but for the most part, the big block of attention can stay in the homework basket. Whereas in an ADHD brain, instead of a basket, each task is like a magnet. But the more stimulating and fun the task is, the bigger the magnet becomes. So you may really need to get your homework done. However, that homework magnet is a lot smaller than the go play video games magnet, which is constantly trying to pull your block of attention away. This also works to where if there's one magnet that is massively bigger than the others, it can become very hard to pull your attention block off of it. This is known as hyperfocus, and it's sort of our secret superpower. I don't get this very often, but when you do, it's like you're the most locked in person in the world, and you can get a ridiculous amount of stuff done. I got it most recently during my video game Hunger Bars video, where because I'm still pretty new to editing, I couldn't quite make this red dot move across the screen the exact way that I wanted. And when I finally got it just right, I looked up, and it had been 3 hours. That's a great video, by the way, go give it a watch. This attention deficit also manifests itself in other areas of life, such as easily forgetting things such as appointments or possessions, as well as difficulty in holding certain thoughts or forgetting something really important 3 seconds after it's come into my brain. It's genuinely a daily occurrence. If I think of something really cool or remember something I need to write down, and by the time I open up my Google Docs, I've forgotten it all and it's beyond frustrating. It kind of feels like my brain is a soupy, goopy mess where thoughts and ideas just kind of float around and can very easily float away in an instant. And possibly the most debilitating part of attention deficit is a tendency to avoid menial tasks that require sustained mental effort. To give an example, when I was a kid, I was working with my dad on a piece of homework. To finish it off, I needed to copy down a few lines of text from a history book into my workbook. This would have taken a neurotypical child maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do, but how long did this take me? Pretty much close to 45 minutes. A lot of you probably sat there thinking, what the hell are you talking about? How did it take you 45 minutes? Just write it down and then you're done. But to a neurodivergent kid like me, getting me to just sit down and do it is genuinely like making me walk across boiling hot lava. I would find every tiny excuse not to do it, and then spend the entire time walking around panicking about having to do it. Again, it sounds so silly to anyone who hasn't experienced it before, but in that moment, it is the most difficult thing in the world to make yourself just sit down and concentrate. Moving on, we come to the H, which stands for hyperactivity. This part manifests itself in several different ways and is of course different for every person. In my case, it means that I have to be constantly moving my body in some form or another. If I'm typing like I am right now, then that will suffice. However, if I'm watching a YouTube video or doing something not particularly interesting, I'll often bounce my leg or shake my foot. I've done it literally my entire life, and a majority of the time it's so unconscious that I don't even notice when I'm doing it. I also do a lot of unintentional hand boning, which I have been told off for a lot. It's hard to explain. If I just sit myself still and try not to move at all, it genuinely becomes quite uncomfortable and actually makes it harder for me to concentrate. Me doing that kind of constant movement is actually a way of keeping me focused, as it makes me a lot less susceptible to external stimuli. It's kind of like shaking my foot or bouncing my leg is a way to keep that part of my brain busy so the rest of it can function properly. Even as I'm writing this out right now, I'm shaking my foot to help me concentrate. Another symptom of hyperactivity is a trouble with waiting for stuff and a general just lack of patience, and this will come up a lot when we get onto video games. Think of it as our brains are in constant overdrive, so something that will happen quite a lot is we'll finish people's sentences for them before they can, and we'll really have trouble holding our tongue when we want to speak. We don't do this because we mean to be rude, it's simply because when we get a thought in our heads and we want to say something, we just have the need to get it out then and there, or we'll probably forget it in a few seconds. In recent years I've really tried to pull back on this and just let people finish their sentences without butting in, but because of this I then forget what I want to say to them after they finish their sentence. Okay. Now that you hopefully have a better idea of what kind of brain us folks are working with, let's now move on to what we came here for. Video games. When looking at my Steam profile, there is one game that stands above and beyond the rest in terms of playtime. However, it's not my favourite game, or really even in my top 5 games. So why have I played it so much? Well, to me, playing GTA Online is the equivalent of ADHD crack cocaine. Can I say that on YouTube? I guess we'll bloody find out. So why is this the case? Well, it's 3 words. Short-term goals. Because of the way that our brains are wired, we are most averse to long menial tasks like long tax forms or playing Dark Souls 2. Conversely, we absolutely love short and fulfilling tasks like ticking off checklists and uninstalling Dark Souls 2. GTA Online started off its life as simply a sandbox playground for you and your friends to mess around with very little actual substance. But in the 12 years since its release, it has grown and grown into a pretty damn big game that is perfectly playable fully single player. And the biggest of these additions are all the different businesses that your character can purchase and run. We're talking nightclubs, drug labs, money printers, gun running, air freight, and a bunch of others that all come with their own missions and things to mentally keep track of. You may be thinking that it sounds like a nightmare for my brain to keep track of it all, but rather it's actually the opposite. I find that when playing GTA Online, I have so much to do that there's very little downtime. So once I'm done doing my stuff for one business, I can move on to another one straight away, leading to a very satisfying gameplay loop that gives me a constant stream of rewards. Do I think GTA Online is an amazingly designed game? Not particularly. There's a lot of problems with it, like the rampant hackers that make going into any kind of public lobby an absolute death sentence. But specifically for me, I can find myself just engaging with the systems for countless hours and not getting bored because it gives me lots of small, short-term goals to achieve. You find this a lot with people who have ADHD. If you give us a long test question, for example, where we have to write down 1,000 words, we struggle with that pretty hard, as the satisfaction of completing it feels so far away. But on the flip side, if you give us a 20 question multiple choice, we can do that really well because we get that little dopamine hit for every question we answer that keeps us going. That's why games like GTA Online that give me these constant dopamine hits every few minutes are so hard to put down. But short-term goals alone aren't sustainable, as that can get stale pretty fast if it's the same thing over and over again. That's why eventual long-term goals that then can change up the short-term goals also work incredibly well to keep us engaged. To use the GTA Online example again, if I've been grinding out my gun running business for a few days, yes, I'm making a decent amount of money, but I may then start to get bored of it. So when I start to lose interest in that business, I can use the money that I've made from gun running to purchase a brand new business, and then the cycle starts all over again. By the time I start to run out of excitement, I can go get a whole new set of missions and objectives to keep me entertained for a bunch more hours. This then also increases exponentially with each new business I unlock, as then that's more missions I have access to and more variety in how I make in-game money. So in general, that's how you make the perfect ADHD-friendly gameplay loop. Lots of simple, short-term goals that build up to a long-term goal, which when completed, changes up the gameplay in some significant way. Let's now go over some of my favourite games and what makes them ADHD-friendly. Starting off, we have Factorio and Satisfactory. I'm lumping these two together because they're pretty similar games. Before I played Factorio back in 2020, I would have assumed that this was the type of game that I wouldn't like at all. But once I actually gave it a proper go, I found myself getting instantly hooked. And what got me hooked? Upgrades. Upgrades in Factorio absolutely consumed my life, to the point where I would lay awake at night planning out my oil refineries. because getting new upgrades perfectly follows the gameplay loop that I laid out in the previous section. You get a new upgrade, which in the short term gives you a whole bunch of new toys and buildings to mess around with, so that part of my brain is engaged. And then the new long-term goal is getting to the next research milestone. Specifically for this type of game, it's a loop that works extremely well for me. Satisfactory also works the same, where you have these tier milestones that unlock a bunch of new stuff for you to then use and have fun with. If these games gave you all the buildings unlocked right from the start, it would dramatically decrease the amount of fun I have playing them, as it would lose that crucial loop and just become one long-term goal of beating the game. Satisfactory also has the added benefit of having an entire handcrafted map to explore. I could honestly do an entire video just on this game's incredible map, it's that brilliant. In short, having the option to go and engage in this exploration portion of the game really helps it not feeling stale, as once I finish, say, a big construction project, instead of moving directly onto the next one, I can choose to run off and look for the many collectibles and valuable resources out in the world. This really goes a long way into helping the gameplay feel fresh. And hey, I don't want to hear any comments calling my buildings ugly, okay? It's all about function over form to me, and not the fact that I have the design skills of a vomiting dog. Another game that I became obsessed with at one point is Rimworld. For those who haven't played it before, Rimworld is a colony sim where you build and manage a settlement on a harsh planet in outer space. Like the other games I've mentioned so far, Rimworld follows the very ADHD friendly formula of short-term goals that then feed into long-term goals. However, with this game, it's rather different, as it's much more of a sandbox style, where what you want to do and achieve is very up to you. There is a tech tree and multiple ways to finish the game. However, in my more than 100 hours, I've never actually finished either. Rather, the short-term goals in Rimworld dynamically change based on both what you want to do and also what the game throws at you. Unlike in Satisfactory or Factorio, where you know the end goal from the start and you have a pretty straightforward idea how to get there, with Rimworld it's almost entirely up to your own decisions on what your short-term goals are. Are you going to raid a neighbouring town for resources? Are you going to focus on building up your armory in case of an assault from some bandits? Or are you going to be an absolute psychopath and make chairs out of people? But just remember, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. For example, you may be planning to start a brand new construction project for an expansion to your base, when suddenly a large mechanoid cluster lands right in that area you were planning to build on. This means that your short-term goal has been changed to getting rid of that base before you can continue, and you may very well not be prepared to fight that kind of threat, so you've got to think on the fly about how you're going to solve this new problem. Situations like this happen all the time in Rimworld, and it's why I find this game so effortlessly engaging. It's constantly throwing hurdles in your way, and your colony will only survive if you find a way to overcome them. I'd be really fascinated to know if other people with ADHD had the same addiction to this game that I had. If you did, then please comment down below, as I'd love to hear your experience. All these games that I've mentioned so far have been pretty slow, which you think would be pretty anti-ADHD. However, I often find that faster, more action-packed games can often get quite boring for me, as absurd as that sounds. For example, Doom 2016, which you think would be absolutely heaven for someone with ADHD. However, I actually found it pretty boring. This may very well just be a personal preference thing, so take this with a pinch of salt. But overall, I just didn't have much fun with it at all. The game felt pretty one note, where you just get to this high octane action, and then there's nothing really else beyond that. I'm not saying it's a bad game at all, don't get me wrong, it just really didn't gel with me at all, which is honestly a surprise. Perhaps it could be the case that my mind is always racing at the speed of sound as it is, so gaming is the place where I can feel like I can slow down and just chill out for a while. But this doesn't apply to all games. Some games really bring out the dopamine starved TikTok child in me that just can't stand anything with waiting in it. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this next opinion, but just hear me out, come on, just hear me out. I didn't like Red Dead Redemption 2. Yes, I know, this is one of the greatest technical marvels in gaming history and it's beautiful and I'm a stupid shill with a dumb opinion, blah 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 blah. But Jesus Christ, this game is far too slow at times. Yes, it's cool to walk through a house and open every drawer and individually pick up every single item. The first time. And yes, it's very cool to see a full animation of Arthur slowly skinning a deer in horrific detail. The first time. These things are super cool the first time you do them, but after the second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth time, you're just wasting my entire day, Arthur. Hurry the fuck up! There is a reason that other games either let you skip these long animations, or play them in full for the first time, and then play a much quicker version on subsequent repetitions of the same action. It just makes me not want to engage with these systems, as I will inevitably spend so much time just waiting for these animations to play out. And I totally get that this makes me sound like a zoomer with no attention span, but these are the realities of what it's like to play video games whilst having a disorder that affects your ability to regulate your attention. Another game that this affects is one I really wanted to enjoy, that being Pillars of Eternity. I absolutely adore medieval RPGs. You can probably tell that from the out of which 3 videos that I've made so far, and I really wanted to love Pillars of Eternity when I first played it. However, this game requires that you do an exorbitant amount of reading, as you get these super long sections, which are basically an entire chapter of a novel. Trust me, I really tried to get through it, but I could just not deal with the stop-start nature of it, where I did this awesome battle, and then I've got to stop all the action and read a book for 10 minutes. And this is where having ADHD can really feel like a burden. I've not spoke about it much during this video, but sometimes, and especially when I was at school, having ADHD can really feel like you're living life on hard mode, where everybody else appears to just breeze through their classes with no issue, whilst for you, every single day is a fight against your own head just to try and keep up. Look, I'm obviously in very good fortune for my life and very grateful for the luck I have. For God's sake, I'm a cis, straight, white male living in the UK. I literally couldn't get more privileged if I tried. But this is the one area where I sometimes really hate the brain that I was born into because of this disability. And yes, it is a disability, look it up. I'm sure that other neurodivergent people can relate when it comes to video games and the struggles we sometimes face playing them. Which brings me on to my next section, which is accessibility. And should video games have settings specifically designed for neurodivergent people? Accessibility settings have come a long way in recent years. I even did a whole video about improving the new player experience with them, which you can check out here. But something I've never really heard in the discussion is adding accessibility settings for things like ADHD or autism to help those people who may find their disabilities a barrier to entry for certain games. I mentioned it earlier, but what if Red Dead Redemption 2 had an option you could turn on to skip those animal skinning cutscenes? Or a mode you could turn on so that Arthur can loot items without having to individually open every drawer, similar to how it's done in The Witcher 3. Or perhaps in Pillars of Eternity, we get an option for a small bit of text to summarise the long text passages for those who don't want to read the entire thing but still want the important story context. I'm generally in favour of adding as many extra game options as possible for single player games, as everybody has specific needs, so I really don't see a downside in adding these kind of settings. And I know that if this was added, there will be a bunch of pushback from people complaining that it lessens the game and is only for lazy people. In which case, you know, just don't turn it on. But I'm really curious to hear your guys' opinion on this topic, whether you're neurotypical or not, so make sure to leave it in the comments down below. Also, I know I've said it before, but please remember this video is purely just my opinion and my own unmedicated experience, and does not reflect on the entire ADHD community. If you're interested in learning more about ADHD, then check out the channel How to ADHD. It's given me a lot of great tips over the years and greatly improved my life. I'm actually going through the process right now of getting ADHD medication for the first time in my life, so I may end up making a follow-up video on what gaming is like when I'm medicated. So make sure you subscribe so you didn't miss that one out. Jesus Christ, that was cringe and I want to do that again. I wanted to finish up today's video by just sending a message out there to anyone struggling with their ADHD, whether you've been recently diagnosed or you've known your whole life. I totally get how sometimes it feels like we're wired just completely differently from everyone else and we just don't fit in. How we have to scratch and claw to get by sometimes in a world that isn't really built for the way our brains work. But that's what makes us unique. I know for definite that I would not be the same person if I wasn't born with this condition. And I know that the people who love us wouldn't change anything about us. So use your superpower as best you can and try and make the most of it. There are so many groups and resources out there to help you manage this condition. And overall, the world is a much happier and sillier place with us in it. Thank you to you all for watching today's video. It was by far the most personal video I've ever made on this channel, so I really hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more discussions on ADHD and how that prevents me from playing complex games correctly, then click here, check out my video on that. Or click here to check out my video on video game outrage culture. Thank you.